So now that we are aware of all the parts, let's go into understanding significant sub-assemblies here and learn more about it. The first sub-assembly that is of importance here is the base assembly. The base assembly essentially has a lot of components that are mounted to it. What we see in front of it right here is the print bed plate. The print bed plate is mounted onto something called the print bed. That's the part that gets heated up so that our material sticks to the bed. The print bed plate moves along the y-axis, which is away from me and towards me, using a belt, which is our y-axis belt. And this y-axis belt basically is driven by a motor here, which is our y-axis motor. There's also another component which helps us define how far this print bed could move, and that's the y-axis limit switch. When this y-axis limit switch is actuated right there, you hear a click sound, and essentially what that does is it closes a circuit as soon as it's pressed, so that it lets the brain of this printer, the motherboard of this printer, know that you have reached a limit. Now, where is that brain of the printer? So the motherboard or the brain of the printer is resting right here at the bottom, and this is also actually the front side of the printer. So it's resting on the front left corner of the printer. There is a fan here to cool down the motherboard, as well as there are all these interfaces. For example, we have an SD card slot so that you could put in an SD card and upload your files to this printer. And there's also another terminal for a micro USB so that you can transfer the files through a micro USB connector. Other than that, this base assembly has these knobs. These knobs essentially help us adjust the height of this printer bed by rotating this knob clockwise or counterclockwise. For example, if we consider viewing it from the top, when I'm rotating this knob counterclockwise, the print bed is moving down, and when I'm rotating it clockwise, this print bed is lifting up. So we'll be using these knobs to calibrate the height of the print bed with respect to the height of the nozzle, and that would be the last step here after we are done with the entire assembly. So that's everything about this print bed. Another just basic structural element here is all these bars on the left and the right, and the entire chassis or the entire structure on which this whole printer base assembly is held on. Moving next to the other major subassembly is this motor carriage. It holds two of the important motors. One of them is the extruder motor, and the other one is the x-axis motor. So what does an extruder motor do? The extruder motor basically helps us push the filament towards the extruder assembly, and essentially this end of the extruder assembly, which is this tube, is attached to the extruder motor so that the material can be fed into our extruder assembly and can be exited through the nozzle tip. So that's our motor carriage assembly. The x-axis motor actually also has the x-axis limit switch, similar to how we saw the y-axis limit switch. And this basically will be pressed by our extruder assembly as it's going to move along the x-axis. We will see this when we are all the way at that point of the assembly where we are trying to move the extruder assembly on the x-axis rail, and that would come and hit this limit switch and press it. As next step, we will start with assembling our sidebars, our screen, our power supply. Then we'll go to assemble the motor to the base assembly, the z-axis limit switch, and the lead screw. We'll move forward to a major subassembly, which will be our X-rail subassembly, and we'll assemble all these components together so that this can then sit onto the sidebars and create our z-axis assembly component that's going to move. Then we'll be putting together the entire box structure of our printer using the top bar, and on top of it we'll mount a spool holder assembly, and that will help us complete the entire assembly minus one last step, which would be connecting all these wires that are exposed right now to their respective motors, limit switches, power supply, etc. So let's move to putting together this printer now.